Hi, folks. I'm Jess Lolka, contributing editor for Data Center Knowledge. And here today, I'm chatting with Prabhakar Maswamy, a senior product manager at Legrand in the Data, Power, and Control division. And today, we're going to chat about AI rack resiliency and safety, ensuring reliable power infrastructure. Hi, Prabhakar.
Hey, yes, nice to connect with you.
Yes, great to connect with you as well. Let's just jump into it. The first question is, as AI-driven workloads push the limits of data center power consumption, what trends are you seeing in terms of increasing power demand?
Thanks for the question. But before jumping into answering that question, I just want to give a broad spectrum of what we are going to cover today and why we are going to talk about this. I would say last 3-4 years, we have been talking about, power demand is increasing. And we are deploying all these high density AI rack servers on this high capacity racks. And so everybody power is in demand, and everybody wants the latest, greatest, most expensive solution. So they are all trying to upgrade or build more data centers. So when you're talking about all these high density, high capacity, high need servers, the biggest concern becomes two things. One is, all right, I'm putting in a lot of money. How I'm going to make sure that there is no downtime, and then how is when I'm deploying all these equipments, how is safety is maintained, or because safety becomes a big concern when you're talking about really high power. When I say high power, you're talking about 415, 480, 600 volt, IR currents like 100 amps, 125 amps. So all these things becomes a big concern, both from safety and also from the downtime perspective. So before getting into the instant energy, let me just give a high level definition of what an instant energy is. Instant energy is an amount of energy which is at a very prescribed distance from the equipment generated during an electrical arc. So when you look at a typical data center installation, you have the busway on the top, which is bringing in higher input voltage and current into the rack. And these are installed in a way that the person needs to be wearing some kind of a PPE equipment to avoid any kind of electrical drag, right?
Yes.
So, but given this, it's really now that the distance from where they work on this equipment really matters. So, and to be really safe, can these PPE materials, equipments can really support these things. So what Starline, one of the DPC company, has come up with is an remote actuator. So this remote actuator is kind of a plug-in to their busway system. So when somebody is trying to, after the initial deployment, before you physically deploy the unit, and then when you want to actually go live, you can use either a wired or a wireless actuator to really turn on the equipment. So this way, nobody is there within the arc, and they are in a very safer distance. And then rather than doing a manual way of turning on, they would actually can do this remotely from a distance of, I think it's 50 meters.
Okay.
And that is a very safe enough distance to actuate this. So this way, the initial, you don't have to worry about the PPE, and you are very safe when you're going live with your deployment.
Okay, excellent. That's great. My next question is kind of from lab to data center, what tests are needed to validate AI ready cabinets? As rack loads get, larger and heavier, as we chatted about, what lab tests assure that these cabinets will stand up to new demands?
Right. That's a great question, because when you're deploying all these high efficient, high capable AI servers, you are talking about millions and millions of equipments worth of equipments that's going on in the rack, right? When you're deploying these expensive equipment, IT equipments in your rack, you have to make sure that the rack can actually withstand all the weight that goes on it. So historically, we have seen where like when I say history, the history is very small here because in the last
Yeah.
3 4 years, the whole AI market has gone crazy,
Hmm.
and we were shipping racks with 1,500 pounds, and now
Hmm.
the average is 3,000 pounds. We just doubled in 3 years,
Oh yeah.
right?
That's
So
wild.
which means you need to have a very sturdy rack which has gone through a lot of certifications and
Hmm.
testing before you actually deploy these equipments. In Legrand CCB cabinets, what we do is we go through 4 different kinds of testing before we send these racks to our partners. So
Hmm.
first thing we start with a standard safety and durability certification, which is from UL, which is UL 2146. And
Hmm.
as part of this testing, I think every enclosure that is shipped in the data center world has to go through this certification. And as
Yeah,
part of
that
this
makes sense.
certification, we also do a 10 degree tilt testing so that we make sure that the electrical, the grounding and bonding are also tested to electrical safety. So
Hmm.
this way, when you're tilting the cabinet like by 10 degrees, you are just making sure that all the um, closures and casters are connected properly.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
the second test, which is again, this is an in-house testing. There is no real um, safety standard that's been tested here, specified here. But in this functioning and rolling test, what we do is we just go crazy about taking a rack and rolling it on the ramps, inclines, other obstacles. So make sure that the casters, which are the joints between the different rack components, are they work as intended. The
Yeah.
third thing is comes to do, okay, now that you have built the rack, now you're going to transport the rack. So we need to comply with the ISTA 3B standard, which is to do with the transportation certification. This is a sequence of rigorous tests which includes the tip, rotational, incline, vibration, forklift, those kind of stuff. And then on top of it, we just need to repeat this multiple times to qualify for this test. And the
Hmm.
last one, which now that I'm touched that I know I'm not jinxing that we see earthquakes more everywhere, but more and more countries and regions are becoming earthquake prone. So we have to do a seismic certification, which is ASC dash dash 7, which is done by a third party, which tests the effects of shock and vibration on these racks.
Okay.
So every cabinet, a cabinet that is shipped by Legrand goes through all these rigorous tests. So that way, like that's one least component that customer need to worry about.
Great. Yeah, so we kind of talked about the hardware. So now in terms, going more to power specific, how is the increase in power consumption handled and what are the side effects of higher density racks?
Yeah, fantastic question. Right. So eventually, now that we covered the the busway, the power that's coming from your tap box, and
Hmm.
now we have a safety, I would say a safe rack where you
Hmm.
don't have to worry about installing the equipment. Now it comes to like, now I have this, let's say a 48U rack, and
Hmm.
I'm deploying 6 AI servers and couple of network gears into it. And now I'm talking about, okay, this rack is going to draw over 100 kilowatts.
Hmm.
So when a rack is consuming 100 kilowatts, it's going to emit a lot of heat.
Oh, absolutely.
Which first thing is heat, right? So which means that I'm going to have some cooling challenges,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That is number one. Second thing is, okay, um, now that before that, I need to make sure that my data center can actually have this kind of power consumption possible. Like meaning, I'm going to deploy a row of 8 racks, and each rack is drawing 100 kilowatts, which means that in a small row, I'm almost close to one megawatt,
Hmm.
or sorry, 1 gigawatt, right?
Hmm.
That's like 1 gigawatt in a row.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now, if you're having multiple roles, that could easily become like 10 gigawatts easily in a
Hmm.
data,
Hmm.
right? Which is not the which we have not seen this like few years back. Now we are talking about it, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and then now you have deployed all these equipments, and okay, what kind of access I have to this rack? Do I have any room to maintain and repair if anything goes wrong, right?
Hmm.
And so then finally, there's one thing which is about the cost, right? I mean, okay, I have all these things deployed, and now how resilient is my rack? So that way, I don't have to worry about the cost. I have deployed the best products in the world, which could withstand anything that goes wrong within the rack.
Hmm. Oh,
So
absolutely.
those are the fundamental things that anybody needs to look at before they start planning for an high density or an AI rack.
Excellent. Yeah. So next question is, as power supply or PSU wattage increases, how does that affect power draw at the receptacle level, and what role does circuit breaker trip forensics play in preventing and diagnosing power disruptions?
Right. It's a great question again. So with the evolution of GPUs and the CPUs, which are fundamental for any of the AI computing, LLM, ML, any kind of stuff that all these generative AI, time sensing, all these kind of computational that is needs the high-end servers, which has increased power supply over years, right? We
Mhm.
were, like, for example, 5 years back, when we are using our desktop to do any what we call a pizza box servers,
Yeah, yeah.
they would be like 100 watts. The power supply, they will have two power supplies, and the power supplies would be 100 watts.
Hmm.
So now, with the introduction of the very first GPU, DGX A100 from NVIDIA, it came with you need six power supplies, and each power supply is 400 watts. You
Oh my
start off
goodness.
with that. So now, when we talk about Blackwell, which is their latest, what we call the HGX B200 or the AMD Instinct, they are talking about like 1,000, anywhere over 700 watts, and each has six power supplies, right?
Oh wow.
And
Yeah.
so each of these servers are going to have six power supplies. And then what they say is, if you want to get the maximum benefit of this server, you need to have, at any given point of time, you need to have four PSU on, right? So which
Yeah.
means you're talking about your server which is drawing somewhere close to 4,000 watts,
Hmm.
right? Which if you take that to each receptacle that's going on in the PDU, we are talking about over 10 amps per receptacle.
Hmm.
So with then now, all right. So now each of your outlet is going to draw 10 amps, and as per IEC and UL, your circuit breaker's maximum rating is 16 amps.
Yeah,
So
that's getting
if,
close.
if previous what the PDU manufacturers have done historically is, okay, we go by the capacity of the rack. For example,
Hmm.
if I'm deploying a 415 60 amp unit, I would have 12 breakers and 24 receptacles. So which means each of the two receptacles is protected by a breaker.
Hmm.
But now we have a case where each of the receptacle is drawing over 10 amps. So which means if you plug in two receptacles and the two receptacles is going to draw over 20 amps, then you can't have a single breaker to protect it.
No.
So now it becomes kind of a norm in this, especially 100 and 125 amp PDUs, which is what you typically use for building a 150 kilowatt capacity rack. You need to have a breaker protecting each receptacle,
Hmm.
right? That's number one. The number
Hmm.
two is, all right, you have a breaker and the breaker is stripped. If, like in ideal case, if you have an outlet protected per breaker, then you would know which how much current drawn on that particular output on that particular receptacle, and then the breaker is stripped, so you know what that receptacle is. But
Yeah.
if you have one breaker protecting multiple um, receptacles, then you have no idea which receptacle caused you to trip the breaker. So that's
Yeah.
where the trip forensic comes into play, which
Hmm.
tells you exactly which receptacle or which power supply is it either it's going to be a faulty power supply, or some kind of current inrush or capacitor failure or something to do with the PSU has triggered this failure the receptacle to draw more current. So that would exactly tell you this is going to be the output. So you need to send
Mhm.
some operator to look at that particular PSU and trip the breaker back. So this way you can continue back with a normal operation. The main advantage of having an intelligent trip forensic features, breaker forensic, is to reduce the cost
Mhm.
of the downtime, because the more information that you have, which means you can immediately resolve it and increase the uptime of the servers.
Yeah, exactly. Because we all know that downtime can be very expensive, and
Right.
it's always unwanted. Great. So yeah, my last question is, why are intelligent PDUs and sensors essential for building resilient AI racks as we
Great.
go
So,
forward?
right in the beginning, we really started off with two topics. One is the safety. Right. We did talk about how the busway and the cabinets are um, helping out in the safety aspect of our deployment. And
Hmm.
then then it comes to resiliency, it's all about how you manage your rack, right? What kind of information you are getting from your IT equipments, your rack PDUs. So those are the first two things. So once more the data you have, and the more intelligent information that you have, you can quickly act on any kind of issues that either you're going to foresee or the things that have happened.
Hmm.
The reason I said it's why you foresee is the example is the trip forensics, right?
Hmm.
You can capture the data. You have what if you can set up alerts and everything to really see, hey, is my outlet drawing more than this current? Is there a possibility of my breaker tripping?
Hmm.
Right. So if you go to any vendor today, they have every vendor in the competitor vendor in the market have intelligent PDUs, right? And when they do all kind of metering and monitoring with the standard voltage, current, crest factor, and things like that. But now with the demand of these high efficient, high capacity servers, the need for really high quality metrics, harmonic distortion, trip forensic, all those things becomes very fundamental to be a part of intelligent PDU metrics. So this way, as a as an end user, they have all sufficient information to make both right from the deployment perspective and also on a continuous basis. They have enough data to really understand the quality of the rack. When I say quality of the rack, the holistic view of it, not just the physical aspect of the enclosure, but the whole holistic aspect of what's going on within the rack, right? Whether they get what they expect out of it. That's number one.
Hmm.
The second thing is, so having very highly intelligent metering and monitoring PDU is critical. The second part is we did talk about the heat dissipation, the amount of cooling that needs to be done, and plus now more and more we all came to clear concerns that your free air cooling is not going to be sufficient to do any cooling anymore. So we need to go into liquid cooling. Uh, so to understand the environmental aspects of your particular rack, it is very critical to measure the temperature, humidity, the airflow, and you need to, because of whether you're using a liquid cooling in on chip, you need to know whether that kind of any water leak within the rack.
Hmm.
That becomes very critical because again the having the water leak detection is very critical to see whether there are going to be any kind of moisture or any other liquid present in that environment, which could be a safety issue for the racks. And the last thing is to do with the access control. Now that you have all the equipment, all the expensive equipment installed in it, you need to have a way to protect the physical infrastructure. So some kind of rack locking mechanism needs to be done. And now that these days nobody really goes into data centers, right? Because it's
Hmm.
all in remote locations. So
Yeah.
you need to have an intelligent way of or a smart way of having physical access to this infrastructure. So to me, like, yes, every segment that is coming into the rack, right from your busway and to all the server equipment, everything needs to be monitored and data should be collected, analyzed to understand whether the things are operating just the way expected. And having this data, it also helps to overcome any downtime issues or problems that they face.
Excellent. Yeah, so I think that about wraps everything up. Thanks so much for chatting. It was great learning about all the initiatives, as well as some of the new technologies and best practices for these newer high density servers. All right.
Thank you, Jess. Thanks
Yeah.
for your time.